Lego.
What you need to know is that salvation is by faith and faith alone in Jesus Christ. And faith alone in Jesus Christ is preceded and followed by repentance. A turning away from sin, a hatred for the things that God hates and a love for the things that God loves. A growing in holiness and a desire not to be like Britney Spears, not to be like the world, and not to be like the great majority of American Christians, but to be like Jesus Christ. I don't know why you're clapping. I'm talking about you.
Worship Christ because He's God. He's not like God. He's not close to God. He's not almost God. Jesus Christ is God.
Once I turned to Jesus and I realized how He had changed my outlook on life, not just softball, but understanding how much I have to live for, and that's living to exemplify the kingdom.
The Holy Spirit's in Elijah. The Holy Spirit's in Elisha. The Holy Spirit's in John the Baptizer. The Holy Spirit is in Jesus Christ. The Holy Spirit is in you if you belong to Jesus.
Let me have Christ whether I'm sick or well. Let me have Christ whether I'm rich or poor. Let me have Christ whether I'm alive or dead. Let me have Christ for my sins, and Christ for my guide, and Christ for my power, and Christ for my king.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is Monday night. You know exactly what that means. We are back here for episode 14 of the Bible Lens podcast. Can you believe that we've been doing this already for 3.5 months? And that you guys are the only ones who I allow back on the show after 3.5 months. You guys should be very happy here. We're back here to wrap up a series that we've been doing for the last 3 weeks now. And this is the 4th installment of our Do Not Love the World series. And tonight we're going to focus on the sin of idolatry. And you can argue that this is the sin that is the greatest cause of God's wrath upon us, which is current and soon to come. Let's just put it that way. So we'll go ahead and introduce our guys who are joining us once again. Joining us back this week is our good buddy Johnny. How you doing today, John boy?
You know, I'm alive and well.
Mm-hmm. It's about the best thing that we can say at this point, right? So, also joining us here is our good buddy Samantha. How you doing today, Sammy?
I'm doing lovely, thank you.
Sammy loves TikTok. I think that's her name, but go find her over there.
Kind of.
And then, of course, joining us back here once again is our good buddy Connor. How you doing today, Connor?
I'm doing good, man. Lord is good. That's all I can say.
Yep. Everything's moving in a positive direction in our circle. And I know there's a lot of things going on that aren't so positive in the world, but we're going to talk more about that next week. Obviously, the whole conflict with Israel and Hamas is dominating the news cycle. People are getting in trouble for a lot of their viewpoints about this whole situation. We'll save that one for next week, but we want to go ahead and finish our series here before we get on to that topic. So we started this thing about 3 weeks ago, and we started off talking about the whole idea of this series was that we wanted to expose the ways that the world is essentially created to separate you from God, and how Satan uses sin to pull you away from God's wishes, his wills, and his word. We talked about in the first 3 weeks ago about the sins of money, of envy, about worshiping money, and how that leads you away from Christ. Then 2 weeks ago, we talked about more of the sins of discord, dissension, division, hatred of one another. Last week we talked about lust, sexual immorality, and this week we're going to wrap things up with the sin of idolatry. So I'm gonna go ahead and just ask you guys this here. We're going to start off hot and give you guys a question here with no real background going into this. But Johnny, when you think of the sin of idolatry, what is idolatry in your eyes?
I think of spiritual adultery, and I think of putting anything above God, like wanting anything more than God or loving anything more than God.
Good answer. Sam, what did you take?
Yeah, kind of just what Johnny said. It's anything that takes the throne of your heart above God. It could be pretty much anything from your Pokemon card collection to money to celebrities. Pretty much anything.
Connor, you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. The way I see it, it's just not only you're making that your idol, you're also basically making that your own God. Like that is the thing that you just hold on to and you worship, and you, whether you see it as intentionally worshiping that person or thing or not, that is your God. That is the basis of your life that you're putting on. But the problem is, you know, it's the same kind of warning that Paul makes in Romans 1, where he says mankind worships the creation rather than the creator. So it's making something, and not just an idol of it, but also making an identity of yourself from something else that's not of God.
Very good. You know, we talked about this 3 weeks ago when we started this series, and you look back at the story of Jesus and the young ruler, where the young ruler went up to Jesus and said, "What can I do to be saved?" And Jesus told him, "If you want to be saved, give up all of your earthly things, you give it to the poor, and follow me." And the ruler didn't want to do that because he loved his things too much to follow God. And imagine that being in a context here of, I have all of this stuff, like just physical things, but I have an opportunity to follow God and be one with God here on earth, but I don't want to give up my stuff in order to do that. So at that point, he had made the decision that, his things, his earthly possessions, were more important to him than God himself. And this is kind of the idea of what we're talking about tonight, is this idea of things that you place above God. If God himself was to come down and tell you, get rid of this thing right now and follow me, if there's anything in your life that you could look at giving up and telling God, no, I can't do that, then that's probably your idol, and that's probably a sin of idolatry that you need to check out in your life. And we're going to talk about a lot of different ways of modern day idolatry, and it's very important to kind of discuss this topic in context, because when we talk about Jesus Christ being the savior of men, and what is exactly the sin that we have sinned against God that has caused so much of his wrath to be put down upon us, and why he's so unhappy with us based on what we've done. And if you look at the Old Testament, which is why I think it's very dangerous that certain modern churches try to push this idea of separating ourselves from the Old Testament, because if you don't look back at the Old Testament, you don't exactly know how we got here in the first place. And it goes all the way back to the days of God's chosen people. He pulled his people out of Egypt, gave them freedom, promised them their own land, and then what happened? They constantly went to false gods, man-made gods, demon gods. They always went to worship somebody else outside of the one true God that protected them in the first place. And I know this will be probably a future episode. We'll talk about the big name false gods are obviously Baal, Moloch, Ishtar, a lot of iterations of that, but there's millions of false gods out there. And if you go all the way back to the very first of the 10 commandments, what did God say? Thou shalt not have any other God before me, because I am a jealous God. And here we are, how many thousands of years later, and people still have not learned that lesson. So before we get into a little bit of a Bible study portion of our show, I'll give a quick little shout out to everyone joining us on all three platforms. We're on YouTube, Rumble, and on Twitch here tonight. So Vanya is joining us here, saying hello to all you guys here tonight. Truth is also joining us here tonight as well. Our good buddy Duke Nukem saying that Beyonce and Rihanna are so overrated. That's why I only listen to the sheets. I don't know why that got me. That was funny. Joe said, I don't love the world. It sucks. We'll talk about that here in a second. And then in Truth, obviously, joining us here as well. Like I said, we're on Rumble as well. We're also on Twitch, all three platforms. So I want to start off, like I said, just kind of go back to the central theme of what we've been talking about here for the last few weeks, which is 1 John right here, chapter 2, verses 15 through 17. This is what we've been hammering down the last few weeks. So hopefully you guys should know this verse by heart now, because we're going to bring it up here again. It is, do not love the world. Do not love the world or the things that are in the world. For anyone who loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life is not of the Father, but of the world. And the world is passing away, and the lust of it. But he who does the will of the Father will abide forever. So we talked about in the very first week of this series, we talked about the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life. These are the three things that Satan will use against you to get you to sin against God. He'll use your personal desires against you. He'll make you lust for personal desires. He'll make you lust for physical desires, and then he'll make you lust for selfish ambitions. And he knows that those three things is his most powerful tools to separate you from God. So once you understand that, you're pretty much set up in a world that is using those three things to make you sin, to make you draw the anger of God himself. Then you can kind of navigate your way through the world and have a better understanding of why this verse here says, do not love the world. But for this week, we're talking about the sin of idolatry. And this goes all the way back to Exodus. Now you can say this goes back even further, but we're going to start with this line here in Exodus, because this is really where God made the commandment that you shall not have any other God before him. So let's go all the way back to Exodus 20. This is verse 3 through 6. And this right here says, you shall not have any other gods before me. Now keep in mind, God is literally giving out the 10 commandments right here, but this is essentially the starting point. You shall not have any gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carven image of any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, that is on the earth beneath, or what is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them. You shall not serve them. For I am the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquities of your father upon the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing mercies to thousands and to those who have loved me and kept my commandments. So this was a very big problem during the very early days of, I guess you say, a lot of things. I mean, like I said, you could go all the way back to Genesis to see really just the fall of man, sinning away from God, and the idea that man can become God. And this goes in two different directions here. You have people who will essentially create a false god to worship and like their own graven image. Like I said, when Moses led his people out of Egypt, what did they do? Almost immediately, they created a golden bull and almost created a religion based on that bull, right? I mean, they pretty much did create a religion out of that bull. It wasn't just almost, but. And so you have people who will create religions out of carved images. There are people who will create a religion out of things that are in heaven itself and create false religions out of that, which is why it's simply what it says here. Not even anything that is in heaven above, you're not allowed to make images of. And there's a lot of churches that violate that rule. We'll talk about that on another time. And then any other things that are in beneath, which means that, demon gods that are out there. Like I said, there's so many false gods out there. I know Hinduism has been a big topic over the last few months due to certain people who are running for president in the United States right now. But Hinduism is a religion that has millions upon millions of gods. You could pretty much assume that every single one of them are demons at this point. But this is one of the biggest sins that man commits against God, that strikes the anger and the wrath of God, is the idea that you're going to essentially take the attributes and give the glory to things that were created by God and done by God to somebody else who is not God. And for so many years, people have done this, and we see this continue today, because when you don't follow the one true God of the Bible, it's not that a lot of people like to think that, oh, well, I'll just be an atheist and I'll just have no God. It's like, no, when you remove that spiritual void out of your life, you tend to want to fill it up with something else. And there's a lot of ways people try to fill this void here as the years have gone on. And I want to go ahead and jump to Isaiah here for a second. So we're going to jump to the book of Isaiah. This is chapter 44, and this is verses 9 through 12. And this is talking about the foolishness of idolatry. And this is really talking about Israel. And I know we'll talk about Israel later on in our upcoming episodes here, but this is talking about anyone who commits idolatry is a fool in the eyes of God. So I'll read this one. 44, this is verse 9 through 12 here. It says, those who make an image, all of them are useless. It says, there are precious things shall not profit. They are their own witness. They neither see nor know what they have may be ashamed. For those who would form a god or mold an image that profits them nothing, surely all his companions should be ashamed. All the worksmen, they are mere men. Let them all be gathered together. Let them stand up. Yet they shall fear. They shall be ashamed together. The blacksmith with the tongs that works one of the coals, fashions with it with a hammer, and it works with the strength in his arms. Even so, he is hungry, his strength fails, he drinks no water and is faint. So this verse right here, this passage right here, I really like, because this is really just hammering down this idea that for people who seek things that are not God, they think that though by seeking these things and immersing themselves in these things, and some emphasis here, worshiping these other things, they think that they're going to get some sort of fulfillment by worshiping these false gods, by following these false gods that they can't possibly get without God, and they're really just forsaking themselves at the end of the day. It's like this idea is like you have a God out there who knows you, who loves you, who wants you to come to him, that can give you anything that you can possibly desire, and all he requests for you is to follow him, and you reject him, and then you reject him for essentially these false idols that can't give you anything. Like a lot of these people think that, oh, if I worship this God over here, or if I just follow this ideology over here, then that way I can fill that void that I put in myself by removing God. And you're not going to get it. It's not going to be fulfilling. You're just going to be living a life of sadness and misery and emptiness, because you're trying to replace something that you can't possibly replace, because there is nothing in the world that can replace God. And anyone who tries to do that with the use of idols is in pretty much way a fool. So I want to shoot this one over to you guys here before we kind of lean over towards the modern examples of idolatry here. But Johnny, what is kind of your idea of people? What do you think motivates people to follow either a false religion or follow false idols, despite all the evidence of the contrary here, especially in biblical context?
What motivates people to have false idols, like deliberately over God? I've been trying to understand this myself for a very long time, because honestly, it doesn't really make sense. You know, you can describe the objective truth that God more likely exists than not, and that Jesus historically died on the cross and was resurrected on the third day, and people still love to cling on to those false idols.
Yep.
So it's obviously a pretty strong motivation. I truly don't know, other than like some people just want to do their own thing. They don't want to be told what to do. Some people are just, I don't know, maybe arrogant. They love themselves too much. I honestly really don't know.
It's puzzling. I got into this argument last week, and it was a very weird concept of this argument here. There was a guy who was kind of in our private chat group who had asked people to pray. I'm not sure if it was specifically for him specifically or just pray in general. And there was this one guy who got very, very defensive about it, just being asked to pray. It's like, why should I have? It was almost like he took it like as a command, and he got very, very defensive about it. And he's one of those guys who. And I tried to question him on this, and of course he was defensive about this too, but he was a guy who claims that he was a Christian at some point of his life, and then fell away from the faith, and he decided that he didn't need Christ like anymore. He decided that he didn't need all of that, all of the Christianity stuff anymore. And just listening to him talk and listening to kind of like his experiences, he felt like he was someone who was hurt by a church out there in some way, shape, or form. Now, based on what he was describing, I don't think he ever attended a biblical church, because I don't think he ever had true grasp of Christianity in general. But it was this idea now that, okay, I don't need Christianity anymore, but I'm going to go find something else to fill that gap that Christianity used to hold. And he's essentially one of these guys who have looked for, idols, looked for things to replace God. And I understand, like, some people feel jaded about religion because maybe they had an experience that they didn't like, so they're trying to act out kind of like in a, I don't want to say childlike manner, but they're trying to just like acting out in general, in the sense of, oh, I'm going to show God, or I'm going to show like religion because somebody did something to me. And it's like, I don't think people realize, like, when you do stuff like that, at the end of the day, you're only spiting yourself. Like, I know people have this mindset that, well, if I do this, then this is really going to upset the Christians, or this is going to really stick it to God. It's like, you're just spiting yourself, like, at the end of the day. Like, I know you think that your concept of, like, I'm getting these people like really, really angry and really, really upset, but you're the one that's going to be judged at the end of the day, whether you choose to believe so or not. And you're going to have to answer for a lot of these things that you've done here. And all these things are only going to come back to you. And you're the only person who's going to really suffer the consequences of some of those things. Don't think a lot of people really truly grasp that ideology, because maybe they're just either spiritually blinded or they're just spiritually hurt and they don't want to hear the truth. And we see this with a lot of people. So like I said, they'll find other ways of finding that satisfaction that is ultimately just going to lead to more destruction in their personal life here. Sam, what's kind of your general thoughts on people's, I guess, motivation towards idolatry, whether it's just like false gods? Do you think there's really just deception in play here, or do you think that it's something else is kind of driving this whole thing?
Yeah, I think there's an element of deception, but I think biblically, God talks to us about walking by the flesh versus walking by the spirit. The flesh is guided by things like pleasure. That's probably like the biggest thing. Selfish motives. The biggest thing that comes to my mind is just pleasure. And I think that a lot of people are drawn astray by that. And I know a lot of people who have walked away from the faith because they chose pleasure over the things of the spirit, which is like joy and relationship with God. And that comes with sacrifice. And it's a sacrifice that a lot of people aren't willing to make because the pleasures that are available to them in the flesh are tangible, whereas they don't always see the fruits of what come from a relationship with God as tangible. Because it's something that you really have to experience for yourself. But I'm not that detached from it. Like, I understand even when you're a Christian, you still have that pull toward idolatry, toward putting things over God based on what you want in the moment, toward being motivated by your flesh. And I think that's a really, really easy thing to do in a world where everything that is of the flesh is as tangible and easy to get as it is.
Yeah.
So
it's the idea of like instant gratification in
right.
that sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So people, and that is a form of deceit, as you were mentioning, but my heart goes out to those people because what they're missing out on is like a billion times better than anything that is like tangible, so to speak, flesh-wise.
We hit up on this a few weeks back, and this is idea that Jesus said, don't lay up for yourself treasures here on earth, but lay up for yourself treasures in heaven, right? And it's a hard sell for some people because the treasures you can have now are like instant. You don't have to like wait for it, right? It's not something that you have to look forward to. It's like, oh, I can just get this now, and then I don't have to wait, and I can just enjoy this now. Like, there was a meme that went out there earlier this week on Twitter that I responded to, and it was a question basically saying, if you had the choice between two things, what would you choose? Would you choose $1 trillion in cash, or would you choose 10 minutes to sit and speak with Jesus Christ? Which one would you choose? And a lot of the answers that I got from some people, and bless their hearts, was like, well, I already know that I'm going to get an eternity with Jesus, so I'll just take the money now, right? And then that was kind of like their mindset. And I'm just thinking to myself, you have 10 minutes to essentially speak with God, and it's 10 minutes that could essentially make or break your eternal salvation. Or you can talk to him and be like, hey, is there anything that I'm doing in life that I need to change to make sure that I'm right with you? Like, am I making you have like anything like really spiritual and powerful you can ask in that 10 minutes that can put your life in a completely positive direction? But so many people are just drawn by, the money. And it's like, I'll just take the money. Yeah, sure, I'll give some of it to charity and I'll help people, but I really want that car and that house and those shoes and all these other things that just mean absolutely nothing. And I think I talked about this last week too. Like, Vodi Bakum has a great line out there for people who are like so worried about like their stuff and collecting their blessings and living their best life now. It's like, look, one day you're gonna die, and when you die, somebody's gonna take all of your stuff. Like, so everything that you're collecting on this world now is going to be in somebody else's hands when you die. Because guess what? You can't take any of it with you. The only thing you can take with you is the knowledge of God, is Jesus Christ himself. And that's the only thing you get to take with you to the next life. And a lot of people are just like blinded by, well, I want what I want now. Then, oh yeah, I'll do all that other stuff like later on. It's like, yeah, that's not how it works. Like at all there. But Connor, what's kind of your take on, I guess, I said idolatry in general, and why so many people are just drawn to it? Because I mean, like I said, we see this time and time again. People just can't get away from idols in their life, no matter what generation of people you're talking about. This has been going on since the very beginning.
Well, obviously, I think everything that Johnny and Sam said are right. You know, we just have that grasp of wanting things of this world rather than things that are seeking above. But I think it's also because um, I could think it's because we're very relational, like very relational and compassionate creatures, and we're very compassionate human beings. And I think that says a lot because I think we can display a lot more emotions than animals of some sort. And so
Mm-hmm.
with that, there comes all those desires to always receive that kind of um, I guess you can say, identity, and most of all, gratification. And it's interesting because not long ago I listened to a podcast called Questioning Christianity with Pastor Timothy Keller, and he quotes this. I just found this really interesting because number one, I just love the knowledge and philosophy that he gives. But he quotes this author back in the 1970s named Ernest Becker. In the 1970s, he was a cultural anthropologist and an atheist, by the way. And he wrote a book called The Denial of Death, which won the Pulitzer Prize in 1974. And he was basically the whole point of this book was like, what is the human emotion to like continue to go on through life now that like God is no longer in our lives? Because he was a non-believer. He didn't want God being his identity or his pleasure seeker. He tackles one chapter is like, okay, let's find relations in each other, let's find relations in a love partner. And he says we can try so much, but in the end it's going to fail. And I really like what Becker says in his book here. He kind of correlates this with like Christianity. He may have grown up in a Christian household, I don't know, but here's what he says. It's really interesting. He says, if the partner becomes God, he can just as easily become the devil. The reason is not far to seek. For one thing, one becomes bound to the object in dependency. One needs it for self-justification. One's self-development is restricted by the object, absorbed by it. It is too narrow a fixation of meaning, and one comes to resent it and chafe at it. If you find the ideal love and try to make it the sole judge of good and bad in yourself, you can become simply the reflex of another person. You lose yourself in the other, just as obedient children lose themselves in the family. No wonder that dependency, whether of the God or of the slave in the relationship, carries with it so much underlying resentment. So it's really just, he's basically just comparing that you're just making something that's taking a hold of yourself, and it's just destroying yourself altogether, and it's making it become, I think, this even correlates with what we find in Scripture. I think it's in Psalm 135 or 36, where David says that idol, if you have an idol, you will soon become it. You will become what that idol is, and that's exactly what Becker's saying in his book there. So I kind of find it very, very convincing that both a believer in God and a non-believer in God literally say the exact same thing. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I want to bring this one up here because this is kind of our final our verse here on idolatry, and this comes from First Corinthians. Let me pull it back up here. And this comes from First Corinthians. This is chapter 10. This is verses 14 through 22, and obviously it says here, "Flee from idolatry." And this is the verses right here. But therefore, my beloved, flee from idolatry. I speak to you as wise men. Judge for yourselves what I say. The cup of blessing which we bless is not the communion of is not the communion of the blood of Christ. It says the bread of which we break, is it not the communion of the body of Christ? For we through many are one bread and one body, and we all partake in that one bread. It said, observe Israel after the flesh. Are those not who eat of sacrifices partakers of the altar? It says, then what am I saying then? That an idol is anything, or what is offered to idols is anything. Rather, that is the things that which the Gentiles sacrifice, and they sacrifice to demons, not to God. And I do not want you to have fellowship with demons. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord, and the cup of demons. You cannot partake at the Lord's table or of the table of demons. Or do we not provoke the Lord with jealousy? Are we stronger than He? So kind of goes back to what we've been saying here earlier portion of the show here, that there's a lot of people who think that they can essentially have their cake and eat it too, that they can do things that they know that are demonically inspired, or they can essentially worship idols or follow idols or follow doctrines of things that are not of God and still have a relationship with God. It's like I was just saying a second ago, these people who think that, oh no, I can, if I had a chance to get $1 trillion, no, I'll take the money and I'll just worry about my relationship with Jesus later. It's like, okay, like that is not exactly like how it works. You have to choose one or the other. You can't have two masters here. You can't be like, oh, okay, well, I follow Christianity, but I'm gonna mix a little bit of Wicca in here as well, or I'm gonna mix a little bit of this other false religion that I'm pretty sure is drawing the ire of God. It's like, I think we even saw this with the sermon with Pastor Jeff yesterday. He says that, look, if you want to follow God, you essentially have to deny yourself. And by a part of denying yourself is realizing that God is your Lord, that God is the only one in your life that you should be following. And if there's anything in your life that is separating you from God, then you need to reevaluate those things that you have in your life and move in a much different direction if you want to properly follow God. And like I said, the warnings are there, Old Testament, New Testament, about idolatry. So look at some modern ways that we see people who can possibly fall into idolatry. And then we're going to start off with some, let's just say some not so serious things, and we shift over to some more serious aspects. But does anyone here agree that in some cases sports can be an idol for some people? If like sports leagues, your favorite sports teams. Now, look, I'll admit this here. I was a massive sports junkie growing up in the early 2000s. Like, I was that kid who was watching ESPN almost 24 hours a day to get the football highlights, the basketball highlights, the baseball highlights, the hockey highlights, all that stuff. I could watch sports talk like all day, right? Because that was how big into sports I was. Now, I was never like big on a singular team because I just enjoyed like watching the sports. But is it healthy to watch sports 24/7? Probably not. Is it healthy to have your life consumed by sports and literally nothing else, especially not of Christ? Probably not. Now, there are some people out there who is like, well, for me, sports is more just a casual thing. I watch to kind of get an escape from daily life and stuff like that. I can understand that argument, but we also know there's people out there who take it much, much more serious than that. And like I said, people can turn sports into idols here. This is a quick little video here from MSG. If you guys don't know MSG, that is the network and the company that owns multiple sports franchises and networks, like the New York Knicks and even the New York Rangers, which is the hockey team. And this is a guy here. He is a New York Rangers super fan, and he's going to show off his New York Rangers man cave. I'm glad Cassie just showed up too, because she can give us a little bit of Rangers insight here. But here's a guy who has a man cave dedicated to the New York Rangers. You tell me if this guy has possibly made Rangers hockey an idol in his life. So I'll just play this video.
A big part when I was searching for a house was that it had a basement that I could actually do something with and make it my dream man cave. I eat, sleep, and breathe Rangers hockey. So if I didn't think I could do anything with this basement, I'd move on to the next house. I found this house. I knew it needed a little bit of work in the basement, so got the house. About 2 or 3 weeks in, I started breaking down walls, and I had a vision which I wanted to accomplish, and took me about 3.5 to 4 months to actually finish completing the build. We got a mannequin here, dressed as a Ranger. This is probably years of collecting, whether it was for myself, purchasing, or with friends helping out, loaning me stuff or giving me stuff to display. So I would probably say maybe I have about 10, 15 years worth of memorabilia down here. Lundqvist, the king, and I have a cutout of him in the net. You see I got a lot of famous Rangers up here: Messier, Gretzky, Leach, Graves, Richter. Probably the thing that means the most to me is behind the bar there, the champagne bottle. That was actually from the '94 Championship Cup game when they actually won the cup. My father was actually able to get into the locker room. He was with Mike Keenan, and he got that champagne bottle. It was signed by the '94 team. So that really holds a place in my heart. I like going to the Garden a lot, but in occurrences where I can't make it, I feel like being down here puts me in that atmosphere. I got the TVs here, the projector, the goal light, so it makes me feel at home, feel like I'm at the Garden. Every time the Rangers are here, it's one big party. We usually coordinate with everyone who brings what, whether it's pizza, drinks, dips, and whatnot. The Rangers bring a whole lot of people together. When it's friends, family, it makes everyone one big Ranger family. Look at this basement, look what I've done here. It's years and years of memories, and I put everything together. I put my heart into this, and this is my biggest passion.
Yeah, so there you have it there. That is a hardcore New York Rangers fan. Probably have more memorabilia in that room than any of us can ever dream of having in our entire lives. Now, on the one offhand side, you can just look at that from a small window and think to yourself, okay, well, he's just a big New York Rangers fan, nothing out of the ordinary. A lot of guys have man caves like this. If you look at it from a non-spiritual lens, you can be like, oh, okay, maybe you're reaching just a little too much there. But let's be honest here. All that stuff that he has in this room, let's just say that it's not necessarily cheap. I think you guys can agree with that. And obviously, this guy, the New York Rangers are his entire life. He has memorabilia for so many decades. His entire room is lit up in New York Rangers blue. He has everything that in his life is dedicated to the New York Rangers. So it's safe to say that quite possibly this guy has made the New York Rangers an idol of his life, because if he's putting that much effort into a New York-based hockey team, I can safely say maybe he's not putting that same kind of effort into, I don't know, God, Jesus, anything spiritual in his life. You're seeing an example here of how there's sports fans and then there's sports fanatics. And the sports fanatics have seemed to have made these teams, these organizations, these corporations, whatever you want to call them here, they've essentially become his entire life. Like everything in his life revolves around these teams. You can kind of see where the problem here is. Connor, I'll start with you. What do you think about people who, I guess, in the realm of sports, who go so far into fanaticism? Like I said, it just becomes an idol for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Well, on one hand, I mean, like you said earlier, from a non-spiritual perspective, you could say wow, okay, maybe you are just taking this a bit too far. Like the guy's just a diehard New York Rangers fan. Like what's the harm in it all? But then again, okay, on one hand, you can say, well, how many times that the Rangers have won the Stanley Cup, and how many times have they actually let him down? And just
some will say the last 30 years he probably let him down.
Pretty much. Their last Stanley Cup was 93, 94. I think that championship banner was, and before that, it took them. The last cup they won before that was 1940. So there's this Rangers seem to have give their fans a huge letdown than giving them a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? Just giving them a lot more hope and a lot more joy. It's just a lot of sadness and despair, a lot based on a lot of seasons I watch of hockey.
It gets to the point, just real quick, it gets to the point where it's like your happiness and your sadness in your life basically is solely driven on whether your hockey team wins or not. And then I think that also becomes a problem too.
Absolutely. And that just really just sums it all up. And you make that your own personal idol. It's going to let you down a lot more it's going to let you down a lot more. And I think the worst part about that is it makes you more vulnerable to sin. It makes you more to being aggressive, being negative towards others, being negative towards your friend, being negative influence towards your friends and family. Where well, if the Rangers lose, I'll go crazy. But this is not good behavior. That's not Christ-like behavior. When Jesus is on the cross, even though it seems like he's even on the verge of death, he's not shouting and cursing at those guys. No, he's saying, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And he's doing it for the benefit of them. But whenever the Rangers lose a game, I guarantee you that guy's probably not a happy man. And I probably wouldn't want to be around him because he's not representing who he's supposed to be, made in the image of God. I love sports, don't get me wrong, but sports will let you down a lot more than they're going to make you happy.
Johnny, let me ask you this question. Where this kind of feels like that there's a line here that has to be drawn. Where do you think that the line is between just a harmless, I guess you could say, hobby, and when that hobby turns into an obsession, which can turn into idolatry? Where do you think that line is, and how should we define it?
Well, I think the line was essentially, it was like the last sentence he said. He was like, "The Rangers are my biggest passion," and that's the line. So if God's not your biggest passion, yeah, there's a red line right there. As far as what it looks like, I think it looks kind of different in every person. I don't know. It's like sacrificing. If you're sacrificing, like having quiet time, or sacrificing, I don't know, like doing things for God, obeying God in order to kind of watch sports or go to a game or something, then it's probably a good indicator that your heart is not in the right place. You know, and that's the most important part. Like, that's why it's so hard to draw the line, because, like, again, Christianity is not about works. It's about whether your heart believes that Jesus died for you on the cross, and, you know, whether your heart truly made him Lord. All we have are the fruits, which are kind of indicators that, you know, your heart is or isn't in the right place.
Yep. Sam, have you seen any examples in your life, or maybe someone that you know, where this kind of obsession with a certain thing has led to you, essentially this thing being an idol in somebody's life or in their life? Have you known people like this in your life before?
Yeah, the first thing that came to mind is crazy. So ninth grade, this kid Sean was like super into Lady Gaga. Like, his entire personality was about how much he liked Lady Gaga. He wasn't straight. That's beside the point.
I mean, if he's a Lady Gaga fan, that goes without saying, but continue.
But like, that was all he would talk about, like, ever. And it was to the point, like, I think he so badly wanted to build his identity on this. And that's just kind of, I wouldn't say it's an innocent example, because there's a real issue there. Like, he was looking to find his identity in something. But that kind of goes back to your earlier question of, like, what exactly is idolatry? I think it's anything that you try to build your identity on. And when you're trying to build your identity on something outside of God, it's going to get messy. But it was crazy. He like bought like this like VIP pass from Hot Topic and told everybody he met her. Like, yeah, that was wild. I hope he's doing well.
I hope so too. 'Cause, I mean, but yeah, so you're seeing here kind of like an early stage of how, like I said, obsession can easily turn into an idol. And you think of graven images, it's like, oh, just the New York Rangers logo. It's not a graven image. Well, it's like, well, in your case, it probably is a graven image, because it's literally everywhere in your life. It's become, essentially, it has become like that guy's life. But I do like how you brought up Lady Gaga here, because when we're talking about modern day idols, I think the best example of this is celebrities. Celebrities, in a lot of instances, more than sports fans have, or sports teams, have become modern day idols for people to worship today. And we're seeing this so many times for so many people. I mean, this has been going on ever since, in my estimation, Elvis Presley. I think Elvis Presley was like the first big national music idol that drew so many people. To this day, you still have people trying to go to Graceland. You still have Elvis impersonators. You have people who are just obsessed with Elvis. They can't get enough of him. And we've seen the cycle repeated over and over again. You guys saw this with the Beatles and Michael Jackson and Queen and Metallica and so many artists over the course of the last few years, that people get so obsessed and so endeared with these people that they have made them idols in their life. And I think the best modern example of this right now has to be Taylor Swift, because Taylor Swift is an idol to a lot of young girls these days. So much so that this past weekend she had the #1 movie in America. And it wasn't a few people who went out there. This is an article from Variety here. Taylor Swift's Eras tour, which is basically a concert movie, a compilation of her tour that she put out into theaters, powers to $130 million globally in her box office debut here. So just a quick little rundown here of the Taylor Swift article here. It says that the tour movie was towering over the global box office with $130 million. I think it was a little bit more than that when the Monday tallies came in here, but obviously this is a seismic event here for any concert film. It was pressing considering like just 6 weeks ago that she announced this with very little marketing, but of course the hardcore Taylor Swift fans out there, they didn't need any marketing. They just knew that there was a movie coming out and people went out to see it. So if you were in a movie theater this weekend, you probably saw a whole bunch of Swifties out there, not just here in the United States, but all over the world. I think it made about 100 million here, and then obviously made money all over the place. If you guys have watched videos of Taylor Swift, she's been doing these stadium concerts for a while now. Like I said, she's become so big she can't even do like a regular arena concerts because she would have to do like 4 or 5 nights every single city she goes to. So she just goes to these super stadiums. She can pack in like 50 to 60,000 screaming fans like every single night. And I think they said over the course of this entire tour that she's probably going to make $1 billion just on the tour alone. Like that's how much money she's raking in, and that's how many people love Taylor Swift in these days. And I have a little video here. This was a Twitter video that came out this weekend, and it was essentially showing let me exit out here just real quick so I can get a screen share going. But yeah, so this was essentially a bunch of women at a movie theater. Keep in mind, they're watching a concert movie. So this is not a live event by any stretch of the imagination, but they're watching a concert movie, and this is how the ladies are reacting at the movie theater. Keep in mind, this is in fact a movie theater, but there we go. So yeah, that's just one of the many TikTok videos from theaters that was presented here over the last weekend, last couple of days here. And yeah, like I said, I think when it comes to musicians and celebrities, but musicians probably a little bit more than like movie stars, even though movie stars could be big idols too. But the way that a lot of these people treat these celebrities, these musicians, like I said, they've essentially become their own god. Like there's people out there who are dedicated, who have dedicated their entire lives to being a fan of Taylor Swift or Beyonce, who we'll talk about here in a little bit, or Lady Gaga, where if someone says anything remotely critical about these people, they get super defensive to the point where they would consider doing anything and everything to a person who stands in the way of their fandom of Taylor Swift or any of these celebrities here. Like I said, this is it is not, like I said, a small group of people. This is essentially what it's like worldwide. I remember, if you guys remember, years ago, there was Michael Jackson when he did the Super Bowl that year, and he did the Super Bowl, and it was literally just like the first 3 minutes before he even did anything. The crowd was in such a frenzy over Michael Jackson that he literally just stood there with his sunglasses on for 3 minutes, and people were in the crowd crying. They were passing out. They were screaming and hollering. It was like you would think that God himself had just showed up to the crowd, the way that these people were acting. And this is kind of that euphoric reaction that you get of some of these people. So we talked about kind of the sports aspect of this whole thing, where people can make sports teams like their own gods, and now you have more literal sense of even though people, as far as we know, aren't exactly praying to Taylor Swift and making sacrifices to Taylor Swift, she has become a god for quite a lot of people out there in the world. I'll go ahead and let you go.
Could I say something about that clip? So
go
something
ahead.
that struck me is the body posture of the girls that were in that theater. You saw some of them were down on their knees, their hands were up, they were jumping, dancing.
Oh, yeah.
That is something that you see in a place of worship. Which, call me a crazy Christian, I don't really care. But the parallels are kind of uncanny. These people are actively worshiping her. Yep.
Crying, like I said, hysterics. And we talked about this a few months back. If you guys, some of you guys are obviously follow our barroom show that we do every Tuesday night, and we talked about a couple of times with Taylor Swift how right now there's a big thing with her in the NFL. So the NFL and all of these media outlets are really, really pushing Taylor Swift now. She's appearing at these.
Travis Kelce.
Yeah, of the Kansas City Chiefs. So she's appearing at all these games, and even watching the game, it's like it's almost 24/7 coverage of Taylor Swift. Every time Kelsey makes a catch, oh, let's shift over to Taylor Swift, and people are spending more money to go to NFL games because they know that they're in the same building as Taylor Swift. Like nothing about the game itself has changed. It's like, oh my God, Taylor Swift's going to this game. I need to be at that game too. And there was also things about her concert itself. We did a video going back a few months talking about how there was possible witchcraft happening at her concerts. We've talked about the stories, me and you, Sam, have talked about the stories about people who have attended these concerts and they suddenly just lost their memory. They don't remember exactly what happened. I don't know if that's from just pure euphoria, or if there's something going on at these events that all of a sudden they're having memory loss, which is not a good thing in the context of, like I said, going to these events for several hours. But like I said, she's the biggest pop star in the world right now by far. She's the number one cash cow, and there are people who are just absolutely obsessed with Taylor Swift. And I just think to myself, God saying once again, "Ye shall not have any gods before me. I am a jealous God," and I can't imagine in any way, shape, or form that He is pleased by seeing the amount of, let's just say, idol worship that is going on with Taylor Swift in our society now. John, I saw you had a face there. Do you have something you want to comment on this one?
I thought it was really interesting that you brought up that Taylor Swift was potentially performing witchcraft at her concerts. And when I saw that video, like I did see the kind of the Christian worship posture of some people. It also looked like some people were straight up demon possessed. And I'm wondering if that witchcraft and the demon possession, like looking people, have anything to do with one another.
With the possible memory loss of people going to this event and then coming back after the fact, be like, oh yeah, I don't remember what happened, but I know I had a great time. Go ahead, Connor.
Yeah, there's a really good YouTube channel that I love watching. Maybe some of you guys might know it. It's called Fight for Truth. The guy's name is Colin. It's a Christian YouTube channel, and recently he did an episode on Taylor Swift, and I think that episode was particularly just her saying that I have, like, she basically says and a lot of famous celebrities out there say this, like they basically sell themselves to the devil. Now, some of them may just be hypothetically just saying that, they're just like joking, or like they're just being like they're just expressing like their fame. Like they're like, oh yeah, I sold my soul to the devil, but I don't really believe in the devil. But if I did, I have a lot to thank him for. But basically, that episode just basically tackles like these musicians. Like she is one out of many who just like completely dedicate their whole lives and basically their whole souls to just get as much as worldly fame as possible. Like we see this happen with, I mean, there's plenty of other musicians who have gone out and say, yeah, I've done this kind of, I do these kinds of new age practices too. I read tarot cards. I practice astrology. I do all this kind of stuff. I summon all these apparently kind of demons, even though some of them may not be even religious themselves, but yet they say, wow, look where I am now. And they all like the main thing I just seen in relation to that is like they're all just saying, yeah, I practice new age magic stuff. Yeah. And they credit that to their fame.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Fight for Truth, because there's another good Christian YouTube channel out there called Good Fight Ministries, and they have it was a 3-hour documentary they did. This is back in 2004, like, by the way, so this is even applied to like kind of like the more modern musicians, but it's a compilation of all of these like big major music stars that we all know. This is a Taylor Swift concert, by the way, just in case you were wondering what we were playing on screen here. So yeah, this is what Taylor Swift shows look like, but it's a 3-hour compilation of, like I said, people like Elvis, people like, Led Zeppelin, and so many bands and musicians over the course of, the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, who are all doing candid interviews talking about the fact that they, in one way, shape, or form, credit Satan for their success, and they talking about dabbling in the witchcraft and talking about the things that they've done in their personal life. And I think when you isolate one of these interviews, it's very easy to discredit it and be like, oh, well, he's not being serious, or oh, they're just trying to get a rise out of you. Or my favorite line, oh, it's just art, bro. That's not my favorite line that I get back from these people. But when you start putting it all together and like every single person is saying the exact same thing, it gets to a point where if you don't accept that Satan has in some way, shape, or form demonically inspired the modern music industry, film industry, or a lot of ways that we're seeing these idols go about here, then you're you're either just in denial or you're just completely blind to like what's really going on here at the end of the day. Because like I said, a lot of this stuff is very, very sinister when you really get down to the nooks and cranny of it. And like I said, I told people this a few years ago when Taylor Swift's last tour she did, I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago. Immediately after that tour ended, that was when she was going up against that woman Blackburn in Tennessee, and she started like professing all of these like liberal ideologies, talking about like abortion and gay rights and like all this stuff. And she did that the day after her tour ended, where all of these people, keep in mind, when you look at Taylor Swift, there's a lot of people who call themselves conservatives, a lot of people even call themselves Christian, who are fans of Taylor Swift. So she has a lot of the Bible Belt audience behind her back right now. And she basically went out there, got everyone's money, and then turned around the very next day. It's like, okay, here's all the things that I support that you guys don't support. And then she started doing like videos, like calling people like Trump supporters bad. And if you don't support this, you're bad. And you saw there was an interview that she did where she was basically crying, saying that that's not Tennessee values and stuff like that. So I didn't trust her for a while, but before that whole point, just put that out there. But her popularity has not waned at all since that happened. She's even more popular now, and there's a lot of people who are letting their young daughters follow Taylor Swift and idolize Taylor Swift, and they have no idea what she's bringing their kids into. Like at this point, they're just completely like blind to it. Like I said, you're taking your 10-year-old daughter out to a Taylor Swift concert thinking like, oh, it's Taylor Swift, she'll be fine. And next thing you know, they're doing witchcraft here, and now your daughter has memory loss and you don't know what the hell happened. It's just like, oh, Go ahead, Connor.
Yeah, just one last thing I want to say here. And like, nobody's a perfect human being either. And
yeah,
I think one question I always just like to say to like whenever I'm sharing the gospel with like a non-believer who doesn't think they need Christ, and I'm like, okay, let me ask you something. Do you want every single thought that you've ever had, whether intentionally or unintentionally, just be projected on a movie screen in front of the whole world to see? No. Mm-hmm. Why is that? There's some stuff that you have thought of, either intentionally or unintentionally, that you do not want the whole world to see. Taylor Swift is no different. She is not a good human being. And I say this not just because like I'm talking down on her, and I'm not a Taylor Swift fan at all, but I did the same thing with Herschel Walker, the famous running back from Georgia. Yes, he's one of the greatest college football players who ever lived, and he's one of the greatest Bulldogs who ever lived. But then again, this was a man who has an anger problem and physically abused his wife. And Taylor Swift, she's known for talking down guys who have breakup songs with her, who she just inspired her to write breakup songs about them. And so that's basically like just pushing encouragement for all the guys in the world. Wow, if you're just gonna like talk smack about this guy, some guys have like treated you badly, and there's no denying that. But the fact of the matter is, you're just fighting fire with fire and just making them look bad. That's just gonna encourage a lot of guys. Like, maybe I should stop. Maybe I should never date Taylor Swift. And I hope, and maybe a lot of other guys will say the same. But she's not a good human being. And I think if every single Taylor Swift fan out there would maybe hypothetically see every single thought she's ever had in her life, they would be like, I don't want to be a fan anymore. I guarantee, like,
I put it like this too. As someone who has covered Hollywood for several years now, I gotta tell you this: if you're really deeply ingrained in the Hollywood industry, whether it's movies, music, television, if you're like on the top echelon of that society, you can't possibly be a good person. In order to be at the top on that level, you have to have done something behind the scenes to get accepted into the club. Because yes, it is a club and they don't invite everybody in. So if you're at the top of that club, that means you've done something in your personal life that I think if anyone else knew about outside of your circle, you probably look frowned upon. Maybe some people will grab pitchforks and go into the streets, but we can talk about that another day. But speaking of music artists here, now we talked about how these celebrities can be viewed as idols, and it goes to another level when the celebrities themselves essentially view themselves to be idols. So I'm gonna go ahead and give you guys a picture here, and some of you guys will know what this is. Some of you guys may not know what this is. But have you ever heard of the Book of Hove? Does anyone know about this? This was an exhibit that came out earlier this year. Does anyone know the deal behind this whole thing? This is in Brooklyn, New York.
Looks like Black Lives Matter.
A little bit. You're on the right track there. But for anyone who has no idea what this is, the Book of Job was an exhibit from, like I said, in Brooklyn, New York, at a museum that was released earlier this year. And essentially what happened here is that Jay-Z, the rapper Jay-Z, who I'm pretty sure you guys are all familiar with, he did his own, I guess the best way to describe this is a museum exhibit where he took all his lyrics from various songs that he has done over the course of his career, and he essentially created his own book of psalms based on his own music collection here. So this is an exhibit that came out earlier this year. I think it was back in July when it officially opened. It's at the Brooklyn Public Library. I think it was also at the museum as well. But yeah, I said the Book of Hove, because you got to keep in mind Jay-Z's nickname is Jehovah, which, if you guys know the biblical reference to Jehovah, it pretty much writes itself. Connor's already facepalming because he knows exactly where this is going. But so, like I said, what he did here is that he took his entire music collection and essentially created his own book of psalms, and it's literally a book of psalms like we were reading in the Bible, but it's all Jay-Z lyrics, right? So all of his lyrics, and it's supposed to be a homage to his culture, his music, the business, his social justice, and it's all labeled in one exhibit here that's in Brooklyn. You have songs here from How Did They Do That, So Fly, Work Already. So I mean, you have a guy here who's essentially created his own exhibit where he thinks that his words, what he has done in his career, is on the same level of God himself. Now, this is not a isolated incident. Like I said, if you guys remember the Barroom podcast, we have a couple of videos on this where we covered this. He is producing an upcoming movie called The Book of Clarence. And the Book of Clarence is blasphemous in every single word that you can possibly describe it. It's an idea that's kind of been molded by like the 5% Nation of Islam, and that there's another like a black extremist group, but it's essentially a perversion of the Bible, and we're going to talk about this here just in a little bit here. But what he's doing here is that he reimagined Jerusalem, 30 AD Jerusalem, to be majority black, because there's a lot of people out there, black Hebrew Israelites, who believe that black people are the real Jews and that Jerusalem was actually majority black, and that was whitewashed throughout history. And like I said, there's a whole bunch of things we can talk about there. But Jay-Z produced this film, and it's the idea that a drug dealer, and yes, 30 AD, a drug dealer met Jesus Christ, and he decided that he wanted to have the popularity of Jesus Christ, so he faked being his own Messiah. We played the trailer here on the show before. Like I said, that video is still up if you want to check it out on your own time. But it seems like Jay-Z has this very obsession with being like God, being attributed to God, blaspheming Jesus Christ in a lot of ways, and he is not the only one who has done this. If you guys know, Beyonce, his wife, has also been accused of being involved in some very, very blasphemous things. She had a project a few years ago called Black is King, and a lot of Christians, even in the black community, called this out at the time, because in this Black is King documentary, let's see if I can pull this up here just for a second. In his Black King, I guess you can call it movie/music video, there's a lot of references here to quote unquote African culture, which is really just African paganism, African witchcraft, and a lot of let's just say things that are very blasphemous to the Christian religion and the Christian Bible here. This is, like I said, this is a Disney Plus project that is on the platform right now that has multiple images. We'll try to just blend Christianity with other false African religions, pagan occult elements that are in there too. So people were pointing out there's a lot of occult imagery here, a lot of references to paganism, and like I said, it's very, very evil demonic stuff that's happening here. And like I said, you notice this a lot with Jay-Z, you notice this a lot with Beyonce. There's a reason why for so many years these two figures specifically have been labeled into the whole Illuminati conspiracy theory thing, because this is the type of stuff that they do in front of the world. And Beyonce, we talked about the popularity of Taylor Swift. Beyonce is just as popular as Taylor Swift. Now, she's popular with a different demographic, more of like black women and the black community in general, but she's just as popular as Taylor Swift is. And like I said, this is the type of stuff that they're promoting to a worldwide audience here. Now, like I said, people actually did call this out and say that, hey, look, we know exactly what you guys are promoting here. This is evil. This is wrong. There's a rapper called Killer Mike who responded to this. And I want you to hear his explanation, or I guess his defense of Beyonce here, because this is going to shed a lot of eyes on, I think, probably the biggest problem in our society. And this is going to be probably the heaviest topic we talk about here tonight. But I do want to bring up what he said here. And this is from the podcast called That's Not Christian. So if you guys want to subscribe to them. But like I said, they were talking about, is this Beyonce project satanic? And Killer Mike, who's another rapper, responded to this. And now here's how he defended Beyonce, because people were saying that all this imagery that you're doing, that you're saying is African culture, is actually African satanic culture, pagan culture. Here's how he defended this, and listen specifically to what he says here.
Killer Mike, you guys know Killer Mike, rapper?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So Killer Mike had recently put up a post on Instagram.
What he said.
And I'll read to you guys. Well, first off, he has a picture of an African-American woman with horns. He has a few pictures on here. And they have like those big earrings and the mouth open, like the jaw.
Mouth plates.
Typical things that we probably see on TV, like when they show different tribal stuff.
Right.
So Killer Mike says, because some of us are so drunk off Satan's version of Christianity, we believe Beyonce's hornhead ornament is satanic. It's actually an acknowledgement to who you really are. These women are from Dinka and Mizir tribes. Hornhead dresses and also lip plates are a sign of prestige and honor. Your devil is the white supremacy system that uses religion to keep you enslaved by the image of your masters. Stop.
By Jesus?
Sounds like it. Stop with the self-hate and investigate who we actually are, because we are way before any Abrahamic religion, and will remain long after they're gone. God bless. Love yourself and your own heritage more than your master's version of your mythology. Shots fired.
So you trying to go in on the church, huh? So he thinks it's a white religion.
Right.
That's what it sounds like. He thinks that.
Right.
Okay. Even
That's
though
what it
like the
sounds
Ethiopian church is the oldest
Well, he
church.
called it a mythology. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
The Abrahamic religion. So yeah, man. That was an interesting thing, but it's like me, man. Like my family, my wife's
I'm actually going to stop it right here for a second, because we're going to dive back into this here in a second here now. What he essentially said there, and I know some of you guys are like, well, what is even going on here? There is a lot of belief in the black community that Christianity, as we know it, as we follow it, is a white man's religion. And I'm going to go into kind of the specifics here of what they think here, but let's just back up here for a second and hold on to that thought. I want to go to kind of address the whole thing of Beyonce and Jay-Z. Like I said, a lot of the imagery that they do in their music videos, in their presentations, in their exhibits, they like to present themselves as kings and queens to the world. And you see this with like a lot of people, especially in the black community, this whole idea that we were kings once upon a time, we were queens once upon a time. So they try to recreate that old mythology there of we're modern day kings and queens, we're essentially gods living like in this world and whatnot. And like we were saying here throughout the course of this show, you go from certain things becoming idols to certain people becoming idols, becoming worshipped like gods. And then you start having some of these people view themselves as gods themselves. And then people kind of like accept them, and there's no other way to put it out there. You have people who kind of worship these people as gods because, like I said, the fanaticism behind Jay-Z and Beyonce is just as strong as it is with Taylor Swift. It's just for different reasons here. Taylor Swift at least doesn't put herself up there as if she's kind of like this Egyptian goddess, but you have people out there who do. So now we've evolved this whole thing into people viewing themselves as gods themselves, to the point where they're not only just putting themselves out there as God, they're outright saying that no, your Christian religion is false. So now you're starting to get the full sense of all roads lead to this point right here. And Connor, I want to start this one off with you. And as you're starting to see now, we're escalating this whole thing where celebrity worship is not just a hobby that, I just like this person's music, or I just like, this person's style. It starts to get to a point where it's like these people, they get so big and they get so powerful, so influential that they'll actually lead you away from the biblical God himself. And now it's like that choice of you can only serve two masters. Well, one master is at opposition of God. You're going to have to make a choice. Are you going to choose God, or are you going to choose Jay-Z or Beyonce? And if you're choosing Jay-Z and Beyonce right now, you're definitely not on the side of the biblical God. So what is kind of your thoughts on the escalation of this celebrity worship? Or now, like I said, they're at odds of God himself.
Mm-hmm. On one hand, it's basically just imitated. Like it's clearly what Paul is saying in Romans 1. It's like you are worshiping the creation over the creator. You are basically what these people are basically doing is that they are seeing other human beings, other fragile, sinful human beings, just like they are, and they're just, even though the human beings made in the image of God, there's no denying that, but they're worshiping in the way that we're supposed to worship God, and yet they're putting that worship in that direction towards a fragile human being, but also at the same time, that fragile human being is making them open to a lot of sinister and just messed up practices, such as a lot of ancient paganism and ancient New Age stuff, which is just not good at all. It's satanic, and so it's
especially
this is just the modern day worshiping of Baal and all those other kinds of idols, even though they're not wood, like they're living human beings, but they're not God. And they're just basically sub God.
And that's the thing, like who knows if these people who we're talking about here don't actually worship Baal. I mean, that's a topic for another day, but people look at the Bible and it's like, yeah, Bible warned against Baal worship and Moloch worship and Ishtar worship. Like there's like hundreds of false gods mentioned in the Bible, and we kind of live in this current text of, well, nobody worships these gods anymore today. It's like if it's in the Bible, it's still going on like today. Like none of these practices has stopped. But one of the big things that people try to use when they deny the Christianity as the truth is that they also try to deny the reality of these false gods that people worship, either through these avatars, through celebrity, or where they just outright worship them themselves. And
that's just one other thing. Like just one more thing I just want to add. They're pushing people away from truth. Like they're just pushing this ideology on their followers to where, like, the point to where, oh, I just got to believe in Beyonce and Jay-Z. If they're doing that, if they're saying that Christianity is false, then obviously Christianity is false. We're like, okay, where is their PhD in biblical archaeology, the understanding Hebrew, Greek, and the studies that confirm that a historical Jesus existed? Like, come on, like, where is their knowledge in all that? Do any people actually check their facts to see if whether or not Jesus was a white person, or like their Christianity is only white man's religion, even though history shows it was influenced by Palestinian Jews who pretty much had similar color as the African American people today? Like, come on.
Like I said, we'll get to this. This will be part of our closer. Like I said, it gets worse from here. I just don't want to give away too much here in this segment. But Sam, what is kind of your take on, like I said, celebrities now not only becoming idols, but becoming idols that are moving people away from the one true God?
Yeah, so I that happens all the time. Something that I wanted to bring up earlier, Christian came into my room earlier and she was showing me that on Apple Music it was promoting Taylor Swift. It was like the witchcraft vault, which I thought was really interesting because she's got kind of a cult following. So people are going to see that and be like, oh, witchcraft is trendy now. If Taylor Swift does it, she's my idol. I'm going to go toward it. So it's getting, I mean, I think there was a time where Satan was like, look, if people, as long as they're not worshiping God, as long as they're worshiping something else, like I'll be okay with that for now. It's gotten to a point where everything is pointing people directly toward Satan, toward what he celebrates, toward I'd call abortion, child sacrifice, toward drunkenness, towards partying, towards carousing, toward I mean all sorts of witchcraft, like all sorts of wickedness. And that's what our music celebrates. And I was kind of, you know, it's a thought that I had in college. Like there was a mashup between two songs. It was like one of them was like Jump On It and the other one was like a more recent rap song. I couldn't tell you what it was. But my thought was, I was like, dang, like the kind of the those music or those kinds of music aren't similar at all, just like in the theme and like what they're celebrating, what they're worshiping. Like one's just a fun dance song and one's like celebrating all of this bullcrap.
Yeah.
It's
and
really
people consume it and they're being exposed to things that are far more sinister than they realize, only because they just think to themselves, oh yeah, it's Taylor Swift, what harm is it to listening to like a Taylor Swift song? And she's like one of the leading people to something that's far more evil and demonic that people can realize. But if Taylor Swift is just kind of like the spokesperson of this, you just see, oh, just a pretty little white woman in her 30s, like what harm could there possibly be in her? And it's like, oh, it's pretty harm if you're not paying attention there.
Right. Like in some ways it's more overt, but in some ways it's sneakier. Because with the Taylor Swift stuff, with like the hidden messages and like the witchcraft vault, versus like if you listen to a lot of rap music that's overtly about like murder, drugs, alcohol, sex, all of those things. You know, it's like anything that you listen to these days that's not of God is pushing you down a path, and I suspect it's only going to get worse from here. But
some could say it's already gotten worse here. Johnny, what was kind of your take on what you heard there earlier with the Jay-Z and Beyonce connection?
My take is kind of more of a general take. People worshiping these celebrities as God, celebrities thinking of themselves as God. The fact that is becoming so prominent that I don't know. Like almost every celebrity is kind of doing that, especially with how social media has kind of taken over our generation. All I got to say is that's a sign of the times. If you look at 2 Thessalonians 2, and if you look at Revelation 13, we know that the Antichrist is kind of the last celebrity. He's going to set himself up in God's holy temple and force everyone to worship him as God. Like the Bible literally says, the Antichrist is kind of going to be like the last idol. If you worship anybody above him, especially God, you're going to be killed.
Yeah, and I think that when you look at a lot of things in our society today, it really is like a trial run for the end times. There's a lot of things that aren't, because like I said, we talked about this a while back ago. People were freaking out a few years ago because they thought that, you know, the COVID shot was the mark of the beast, right? And they didn't want to like be fooled into taking like the mark of the beast. And they can say here, we can say that, look, the COVID shot is not the mark of the beast, but I think that a lot of people in, let's say, certain sections of power where they can tell ourselves, how many people can we get right now if we told them that there was this big scary thing out there and that you had to get this shot in order to protect themselves from it, whether it would be to their detriment or not? How many people could we get out there to follow us at this point? How much resistance could we possibly get from this? And I think I just look at a lot of things that are happening right now. You're seeing in the streets of this whole Israel and Hamas debate right now, there are people all over this country, all over countries all over the world. They are marching in the streets with the flags of Palestine, essentially protesting and rallying against the nation of Israel. And we talk about the final days of the nations of the world rallying against Israel, going to war against Israel, and we're already seeing the foot soldiers starting to show themselves even on the streets. So even these things that, though, on an isolated side don't look like, oh, this isn't like the big thing, this isn't like the issue that, you know, talks about it in Revelations, you're starting to see the test runs in a lot of sections here. You can at least see it to be like, yeah, what if this escalates to something bigger? What if this escalates to something a little bit more deeper? It's like we're pretty close to where we are now. Like, only the difference between now and the end times, that a lot more people are going to be dying towards the end times versus it is now. But you at least see that they're getting prepared there. I'll just put it that way. But like I said, we'll talk about that issue next week, but I do want to get back to that one. This is the topic that I was kind of holding off here till the end. This is going to be a very heavy topic because obviously there's a lot of ways you can go about this, but I can speak from experience here. Over the last few years, I've really seen this. I know it just hasn't been around for the last few years. It's been around a lot longer than this, but I've really seen this idea from the black community out there that has been popularized by a lot of, like I said, celebrities, rappers, actors, stuff like that. And it's this idea that somehow the Christian religion, following the God of the Bible, following Jesus Christ, is actually a white supremacist deception. A lot of people out there genuinely believe that Christianity is the white man's religion that is used to essentially weaponize against black people. And like I said, a lot of people believe this. Now, there's a lot of conspiracy theories within the Christianity religion. We talked about this idea a little bit earlier, that there's a subset of black people out there who truly believe that they are the true Jews, that they are the real Jews, that they believe that, like I said, we're talking about the Ethiopian church a little bit earlier today. They believe that the Christianity actually started in Ethiopia and that they're by the fact the real Jews. So they think that anyone who is white who is claimed to be a Jew is a fake Jew. They'll use Revelation 2:9 and 3:9 as proof text to that, you know, the white people claiming to be Jews are not the real Jews, and they've created this whole subset of a religion that is completely based on hate. I don't need to play some of the videos here. You guys have probably seen some of the videos of black Hebrew Israelite preachers preaching hate on the streets of like New York and Philadelphia and the Northeast, stuff like that. You have other sects of this called the 5% Nation of Islam, which is a black nationalist, black supremacist movement that is more influenced by Islam than it is with Christianity. But they also believe in the fact that they represent the 5% of the elites that are, you know, in control of the world, that are the agents who know the truth about the world and things of that nature. And they think that, you know, the nations of the gods and the earth believe that black people were the original people on the planet, and that essentially the history was whitewashed to guys hide that fact that black people are kind of the origin of the creation and the origin of the world, and they were the true followers of Allah. And in a lot of sense, so you just hear like these wild things. You think to yourself, like, none of these beliefs are backed by scripture whatsoever. But that's kind of their conspiracy, that, oh no, the white man changed scripture, they created this false religion to deceive people. And this gives us to our final idol here. And this is not a typical idol. It's not like, oh, this is like a sports team or a celebrity. There are people out there who have gone so far off the deep end, they believe that being black is more important than anything else, including God. Like, their racial identity is more important than anything else, like, in their lives. So we see this so much today with the Black Lives Matter movement and the people who are members of this movement. They believe in their eyes that, you know, their racial ideology is their identity, that this is their life, that they put that above everything else. I'm gonna play a quick little video. It's not the whole full video, but it is Jason Whitlock kind of talking about this issue here and whether it relates to Juneteenth. I'm gonna use this kind of jump off to another point where we talk about modern day idols, because I think we all know the biggest modern day idol of today. But let's just play this here just for a quick second. This is from Whitlock's show about racial idolatry and Juneteenth, and listen to what he has to say.
Juneteenth is a well-executed political propaganda campaign. Leftists use it to trigger conservatives so they can then turn to black voters and say, look how racist white evangelical conservatives are. They're against Juneteenth. It's a gimmick that works every time because of black people's unabated affection for racial idolatry. Our racial idolatry has caused us to believe that any action that infuriates conservative white men serves the interest of black people. That is the depth of our worldview and political strategy. We don't do what's in our best interest because we've been led to believe that our enemy is the white man in general and the conservative white man in particular. Our real enemy is the man in the mirror. Our focus should be on thwarting and frustrating our individual flawed nature and instinct. Secular leftists control our emotions and actions because they know if they frame any issue as anti-white, we will interpret it as pro-black. Juneteenth isn't pro-black. It's pro-democrat and pro-racial idolatry. The holiday is simply another secular tool used to convince black people that politics can deliver freedom, purpose, dignity, and salvation that only God provides.
So that's just from that video. Right now, let's get a little bit deeper into this here, and this is what we're going to finish off on. Like I said, these people who think that their racial identity is their number one idol in their life, they have nothing higher in their life, even God himself, than essentially being black in your blackness. Of course, this has to come with idols, right? Of course, this has to come with figureheads. And I think over the last 3 years, there has been no better example of this than George Floyd. Now, I'm pretty sure everyone here knows about George Floyd, and those few people here who are not American, so maybe they need a little refresher here. About 3 years ago, almost 3.5 years ago, there was an incident in Minnesota where a video went viral. It showed George Floyd on the ground, and there was a cop kneeling on his neck, and he died a couple of hours after being in police custody. Now, the way that this was portrayed through the media is that this white officer was basically kneeling on the neck of a black man, screaming that he could not breathe and that he killed him as a result. And this was the narrative that swept the nation, not only just the nation, but all over the entire world. As a result of this, riots broke out all over the country. There was a point in time during the COVID era where there were cities that were literally burning down to the ground. There was riots breaking out everywhere. Here in Atlanta, the CNN building actually got attacked by these rioters. They were throwing smoke bombs and flash bombs into the CNN center. There's videos of that happening live on CNN. It was a disaster here for this country. And as a result of that, George Floyd became the idol of social justice all over the world. There was laws that was passed in this country to repeal police officers, to defund police officers that got passed all over the country. And here we are a couple of years later. Crime everywhere in the United States has gotten significantly worse. You see videos on social media every day about New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, Oakland, San Francisco, these big blue liberal cities. And the crime there is just completely off the charts. People are now just stealing hundreds of dollars of materials in broad daylight without a care in the world. It's literally the spirit of lawlessness being shown in real time. And you see, even in the UK, where George Floyd has absolutely nothing to do with the UK, but in the UK, the English Premier League decided that they were going to kneel at the start of every game to show solidarity with George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. And it isn't just a thing that they did during COVID. They're still doing this to this day. So if you watch an English soccer game, at the beginning of every single game now, they will kneel in support of Black Lives Matter and the George Floyd movement here. And like I said, George Floyd has in fact become an idol. Here's a couple of videos here, and these are multiple cities like in the United States. This isn't just one cities where we have unveiled George Floyd statues all over the country. So here's the George Floyd statue in Houston that was unveiled a couple of years ago. As you can see here, there's leaders all wearing masks. By the way, that's a separate incident, but all you have leaders all over the world and the country doing this. There's one in Houston. Here's a second one that I filled out. This was in New Jersey. This is a second George Floyd statue being unveiled here. So this is the one in New Jersey. Keep in mind, you're literally just talking about a guy who, when you really dig into the facts, was a fentanyl addict who died in police custody. But he's become a idol now of the social justice movement. So now we're erecting statues of him all over the country. That was New Jersey. This is another one that was erected in New York, in Union City. Here you have him being erected with other social justice leaders and things like this. So this is we started off this whole thing talking about erecting like a gold bull. Like that was like the first like big idol. If you go all the way back to like Exodus, like the Jewish people were worshiping this golden bull as their god, as their idol. And now here we are unironically creating more gold statues of idols that we have created for ourselves, which is a complete violation of everything that we saw up to Genesis here. And like I said, there are people out there who support this movement, who support this ideology here. Here's another statue of Breonna Taylor that we because we have rejected Christianity, because some people believe that Christianity is somehow a white deception, that we've created heroes and prophets and martyrs of our own man-made religion. And then here is the final results of this, and we're doing it all over the country, all over the world. And like I said, nations that do this are under the judgment of God. And we're looking at our society right now and wondering why things are falling apart is because we're doing things like this. We're drawing the ire of God because now we're pulling people away from him. We're pulling people away from Jesus Christ, and we're pulling people towards man-made idols, whether it's sports teams, celebrities, musicians, even people who we've just created out of thin air based on media narratives. George Floyd was someone who nobody knew 3 years ago, and now there's probably a statue of him in every major city in this country now, just like that. And this is the end game of when we stray away from God. There's only one logical conclusion to this, and it's this right here that we're seeing all over the world. And there's going to come a day where people will not repent from this, even given even when this game gets to the last 2 minutes. There are still people who will not repent to this. Let's jump over to Revelation 9 and 20 here, just real quick. It says here very plainly, the rest of mankind who were not killed by these plagues did not repent of the works of their hands, that they shall not worship demons, idols of gold, silver, brass, stone, and wood, and neither can they hear nor walk. So even when they're in the literal judgment and the wrath of God, there are still people out there who will not repent of the evil ways that they're committing right now, even during those last times. And you just have to kind of look at the way that the world is going in. There are so many people out there that are just going in the complete wrong direction. They have essentially been conditioned to become enemies of God, to be enemies of Jesus Christ. And like I said, there's a reason why we call the broad path of destruction the broad path, because there's going to be a lot of people on it at the end of the day. But let's just go ahead and wrap things up here with the final topic of racial idolatry and the kind of this whole movement that it's so evil, like in its core, when you really look at what's going on here. Connor, I'll start this one off with you. What do you think of, like I said, these racial supremacy movements that are, like I said, not only moving people away from God, but are going so far against what his teachings are? They're essentially become enemies of God. That this is how far it goes when you get to this level of idolatry here.
Yeah, I think it really just this whole race worship thing. It's really much just ties into critical. It really also ties into critical race theory. You know, our one race made a mistake by mistreating another race in the past, and so now we got to fix it all together. Now the time is for you to become. Now it's time for you to become the servant and me to become the master. We've just had it, but that the history is also shown that no, we've actually helped each other out. We've actually there were plenty of white people during the time who actually advocated for the abolition of slavery in the U.S. And not just that, but also helped end slavery, in other foreign countries as well. And obviously, there were also other African American abolitionists out there, and they obviously got help. They obviously helped each other out, and that's a great sign. Like, look at that! Look at this amazing moment to where like both white people and black people just got together and ended the horrific practice of slavery. But now the modern day is like, no, we need to push for just like, no, this race needs to be in control now. And it's really just giving humanity reign and control over everything, instead of just letting God being sovereign over all and just saying, no, you need to love. I am the one and only true God. Apart from me, there is no God. And the only command I give you is turn from your sins and love one another. That is the only thing that's going to end all this. It is love one another, not put one person on a pedestal over other people. That's just not going to work. That's not going to happen. It's not going to work out in the end if that's the case.
Johnny, you remember our conversation a couple of weeks back about the sins of discord and, kind of like the sins of, turning people against one another so that they're so blinded of the hatred of each other that they'll never turn to God. And this is another perfect example of this. And people have not only turned to the sins of hatred and discord, but made that sins of discord into an idol as well. Like I said, their racial identity is their idol. That's what they put above everything else. And like I said, the reaps what's the term I want to say here? The works of the flesh. Yeah. You're about on the same plate as I would, but like I said, like the works of the flesh are very, very evident here. What's your thoughts on this, Johnny?
My thoughts are it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, especially when you consider the demographics that kind of overlap with this phenomena. That video we were talking about, it said it was pro-racial idolatry and also pro-democrat. I agree with that, and I think about, okay, what else is pro-democrat? It's this whole like transgender thing, like worshiping your gender identity that's in your mind, and it doesn't really make sense to me how both of these things can exist in the same person. You know what I mean? Like, how can you put race on a pedestal? How can you put like the way your body is on a pedestal and also at the same time want to destroy your body and make it like the thing going on in your mind, your gender identity? I think it just ultimately leaves a lot of people confused, including myself.
But this is, I mean, it's not just here in the United States. I mean, this is a movement that you've seen all around the globe. But I know here it's primarily with the Democrats. We've shifted this whole ideology of we're going to reject God, we're going to reject the Bible because that's white supremacy, it's hatred, it's bigotry. We don't want anything to do with that. But we're essentially going to make the primary focus, our primary idol, our race. We're going to make it our sexual orientation. We're going to make it our gender identity, whether we're male or female. We're going to make our idol, like all of these just things that do not matter whatsoever. But like I said, because we've removed God out of our lives, we have to replace it with something. So, I got an idea. Let's replace it with ourselves. Let's make idols of ourselves, and let's make our identity our idols. Like, this is like, I don't identify as a Christian. I don't identify as a child of God or a follower of Christ. I identify as black. I identify as gay. I identify as trans. I identify as whatever the case is. Like, this is essentially what we've done now. Like, this, like I said, the further away from Christ we get, the more sinister the objective, or I guess you could say the agenda, becomes, and we're seeing that in real time here. Sam, what do you think here?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not really something that I thought about, but that's a really good point. The fact that like you're being like one way or another, or your identity, like who you are as a person, whether it's like I identify as man or woman, or I like am black, or like used to be I am white, like I'm gonna build my identity on that. That becoming an idol is not, yeah, like I hadn't thought about that, but that's very true. Yeah, the issue itself is really strange to me. Just because it's always taking on a new face. Like it used to be, there was a time that white supremacy, especially in the South, was pretty rampant. And now we kind of see it taking a turn where people have gotten fed up and they're angry with the history behind that. And so now it's kind of like we need to silence everybody who isn't like us. Nobody else is allowed to have an opinion on this because they don't understand the way that we were hurt or the way that that history hurts us. But you know, there's always, like, the devil's always working a clever angle to keep people divided, when to me it shouldn't be an issue. It shouldn't need to be something that we focus on so much. Like, we're born into the world, we have no choice as to whether we're a man, woman, black, white, Asian, whatever, but people so badly want to make that like the center of their identity and the center of their discourse with other people. Which to me, just if you think critically about it for like 3.5 seconds, seems like the strangest thing in the entire world. But some people are raised up like with that mentality. Some people kind of adopt it from society. It's very odd. But I'm glad you brought that up as like a point of idolatry, because that's really interesting.
Yeah. And I just wanted to bring this up too, because like I said, a lot of these people here, either whether it's deception or if it's just malice, at the end of the day, they're not going to beat God. And here's a perfect example of this. With all this George Floyd talk, a couple of years ago here, there was a memorial of George Floyd that was erected in Ohio, and it was struck by lightning. And this was kind of the aftermath of this massive mural that was made to the social justice idol of George Floyd. And this is all that was left. One giant lightning bolt took out the entire side of the building. I think Kate was saying earlier that there may have been a statue as well that was also struck down as well. And here's kind of the takeaway for you guys when this is all said and done. I'm gonna jump over here to Galatians. This is chapter 6, verses 7 through 8, and it says, "Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever man sows, he will also reap. For if he sows to his flesh, the will of the flesh will reap corruption. But if he sows the spirit of the will of the spirit, he will reap everlasting life." At the end of the day, there's a lot of people out there who mock Christ. There's a lot of people out there who hate Christ. There's a lot of people out there that despise everything the Bible teaches, and they think that they're going to live a life that is going to be at direct odds of God, that they think that they're going to get one over on God. They think that by attacking God's children, that somehow they're going to stick it to him at the end of the day. God is not going to be mocked. He will get you one way or another. And that's really the big takeaway here, is that all of these people view themselves as idols. All these people view themselves as, higher than God or on the same level of God. And God mocks every single one of them, because he knows at the end of the day that he is above all. You guys are simply men, and that's all you guys are in the scheme of things. You're just simply sinners who are either delusional or deceived. Either way, it's not a good thing. And this is really the takeaway of this whole series here. We've done 4 episodes here, and we could do, honestly, more than 4 episodes here, because there's a lot of other aspects that we haven't talked about in this series. Maybe we'll touch up again in a future series. But like I said, the whole point of this thing is that as a follower of Christ, or someone who's kind of on the fence, you really need to look at the world that we live in today and understand that the world that we live in is one that is designed from top to bottom to separate you from God, to make you an enemy of God or a disbeliever of God. And this is why the warning is out there: do not love the world or the things that are in the world, because the things that are of the world are not of God. Like the things that are out there that the world promotes, money, the worship of money. The people will do anything to get money. They will kill for money. They will rob for money. They will sell their souls literally for money. The envy that goes into that, because you want to be that person who has more money, but guess what? There's always going to be someone richer than you. So the pursuit of money is moot, because you're never going to be the richest person in the world, no matter how hard you try. You look at the things like, discord, anger, hatred. Jesus said, love your neighbor. We live in a world that doesn't love its neighbor. The only only hates their neighbor based on their race, their gender, their sexuality, whatever the case may be, religion. We live in a world that hates his neighbor. Sexual immorality, sexual sin is talked about in the Bible so many times, and we live in a sex crazed culture, and it's not just pornography or movies with nudity in it. We're talking about the way that men and women associate with each other in the dating scene. People are, men and women are just going around sleeping with one another and becoming damaged people who are just undateable at a certain point in time because they've been so corrupted by the world. And here we are here with the sin of idolatry. People have been worshiping false gods since the beginning. People tried to make the argument that, oh, Christianity took from these pagan religions. And no, paganism has always been there. People have always worshipped false gods. They've always worshipped false religions and false idols. It's been there since the very beginning, and it continues to this day. It doesn't continue in the same way. Well, I can't even say that, honestly, because it does continue to the same way to this day. You might just not see it the same way as it does, but there's even more subtle ways to follow idols, to worship idols, to have things that are above God. So what is the takeaway from this series here is that understand the ways that the world wants to separate you from God and fight against it, because at the end of the day, God can overcome any temptation out there, but you have to be willing to seek him. And if you're a true follower of God, if you're a true follower of Christ, he's never going to lead you astray. The world is always going to try to lead you astray. And I made this point, I think, like yesterday or a couple of nights ago on the show. It's like, when you look at the world of lies that we live in today, the Bible may be, I think it probably is, the most truthful truthful book ever written. There's not a single lie written in the Bible where you can find lies in pretty much anything else, or anything else that can lead you astray down a bad path. The Bible, the reason why it's there is because it's essentially your guide to righteousness. It's your guide to, essentially, it's your playbook to fight the world and to fight evil and to separate yourself from evil, so that one day you will be rewarded in the behests of the Father, of the behests of Jesus Christ, as the behests of the Holy Spirit. And like I said, you have to use that as your navigation against the world, because even if you are naive to everything that is going on here, the world is literally against you. The world is really weaponized to be against you, because Satan wants to see you fall. He knows how this whole thing is going to end, and his only joy, his only way to get back at God is to make sure that he can take as many as his people down with him. So he wants you to fall, he wants you to fail, he wants to separate you from God. And you have to understand that the only way that you can win is to make sure that you're on the right side of God when it's all said and done, because that's the only thing that's going to matter. Your cars isn't going to matter, how many women you slept with isn't going to matter, how much money you have in your bank account isn't going to matter, how many millions of people you can pack into a football stadium isn't. None of that stuff is going to matter at the end of the day. The only thing that matters is what you do for God, what you do for Christ. That's the only thing that is going to give you joy, the only thing that is going to give you everlasting life at the end of the day. Everything else, you're just wasting your time with something that's only going to lead you to destruction. So that's my final point. I will flip this one over to you guys. Connor, I'll start with you, kind of a summary of everything that we talked about tonight, and any final thoughts you want to put out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, obviously, just from everything that we've talked about, idolatry, it is a dangerous thing. It just seems small at first. It seems like you're not making a big deal out of it, but as soon as it progresses, as soon as you give it more attention, more thought, more detail, and just continue to find ways to grab a hold of it, it's going to take advantage of you. And the same thing has happened throughout history. It happened just read the Old Testament. Idolatry worship did not work out well for Israel. In fact, it led to a lot of undoing for them. It led to them, being in the wilderness for 40 years. It led to them sacrificing their own children for years, even in the Promised Land. It led to them being exiled in Babylon and Assyria. It led to them crucifying Jesus, our Lord and Savior. It does not go well in the end. And so I would give the same encouragement Paul does. You need to examine yourselves. You need to examine yourselves. See where you stand with God. If you're not giving God the utmost attention and respect and gratitude and love that he deserves, when he has done nothing but love you, when the only thing that you deserve, that you and I both deserve, is hell, and that he prevents you and I from going there, and is willing to die, come down on earth in human form to die for you, that says a lot about your God and your creator, more than any idol that you worship on earth.
There you go. Sam, I guess we get your final words here.
I hate the way I got choked up. I was just sitting here like thinking about God all giggly and stuff, and then you said that and I was like, dang, that hit. But yeah, idolatry, like I'm telling you, I've been on both sides of it. And it's funny because when you're in idolatry, when you're actively participating in it, and like even as Christians, like I said, we struggle with that, right? Like there's always something in your life that you're going to struggle with because it wants to take precedent over God. So my first thing is, if you're a Christian, ask yourself what that thing is. Is there anything that if God told you to remove it from your life, you wouldn't be able to? Because like that parable Jacob was bringing up earlier, there's that man that wanted to follow Jesus. He was zealous to follow Jesus. He asked to be a disciple, and he said, what do I need to do? And Jesus said, I want you to sell all your things and come and follow me. And the guy couldn't do that because as much as he wanted to follow Jesus, that was the thing preventing him from doing it. And Jesus ultimately said, that's going to keep people from heaven. You know, not just money. He refers to the rich man, but that man was in idolatry because that was more important to him than following Jesus. So just ask yourself, if you are a Christian, like, what is that thing in my life? And then if you're not a Christian, I'm telling you, that stuff isn't going to bring you peace. You can have so much of what you want, but you might find yourself in this cycle where you're like, it's never enough. I need more. Or this isn't fulfilling, but if I just had a little bit more, if I had more followers on Instagram, if I watched another episode, if like, I don't know, if I could meet this celebrity, just think about what that would mean to you. Then it would be good. But I want you to think of a time where you got something that you thought would make you happy, and ask yourself, did that thing make you happy, or did it just leave you wanting more? When you meet Jesus, that feeling goes away. He fills all of that. And so I'm not just telling you that to get you to drink the Kool-Aid. I'm telling you that because it's the truth. If you don't know Jesus, that is the one thing in your life that is going to fill that void. So that's pretty much it for me.
And Johnny, last word, we'll go with you.
Well, I just want to give some practical things to look out for in terms of idolatry. In these last days, reading from Revelation 18:3, for all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. The kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich through the abundance of her luxury. The woman in this passage is Babylon the Great, the great city that makes all the kings, all the merchants, all the traders rich, and the fornication, of course, spiritual idolatry. God doesn't call someone a fornicator unless they're cheating on him, unless they're worshiping someone like in a way that they should be worshiping God. And the specific idol he calls out here is luxury. And if you think about like the whole goal of secular society today, that's what everyone's trying to do. Everyone's trying to go to college, to get a nice job, to live the American dream, to have a nice car and live comfortably in the AC and not have to worry about anything. But like, if that's your life goal and your life goal isn't to obey Christ, then you're a fornicator. You're going to drink the wine of the wrath of her fornication. That is the point of the tribulation. And man, that time's close, and you don't want to be doing that when that time eventually comes around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I would say at the very beginning of this night, if there's anything in your life right now that if God were to tell you right at this moment, get rid of that thing and follow me, and you have a hard time getting rid of that, like you wouldn't drop it at a moment's notice, that's probably the thing in your life that you probably need to get rid of, like right now, because that's probably a personal idol to you that's only leading you away from God. And it could be a lot of different things for a lot of different people, but I'm pretty sure there's somebody out there that's struggling with something that they probably should separate themselves from, because it's only leading them to either do a lukewarm, wishy-washy form of Christianity, which I've been guilty of myself. I'm not going to say that I'm not, but either that or it's just leading you away from God entirely. And you don't want to be in either camp at the end of the day. Like I said, when it comes to your trust in God and your salvation, you don't want to play on a game of assumptions that, oh, well, I'll get in, or maybe this isn't that big of a deal. It's like, if you even have to question it, that's probably a sign that it's something that you probably should not be doing. So, yeah, amen. That's pretty much the way that we're going to wrap up this series here. So, episode 14 here is in the books. Episode 15 is next Monday night. And next Monday night, we're going to talk about in detail this whole issue with Israel and Hamas and the two sides that are fighting right now. And I really want to tackle this issue from a Christian perspective, because there's a lot of people out there who have a variation of takes. Some people think that clearly Hamas is the bad guy here. There's a lot of Christians out there that think that Israel is the bad guy here. And when you look at both sides, neither side is particularly friends to the gospel of Jesus Christ at this current time. We talked about the whole thing with Israel and kind of their rejection of Christ. Obviously, we've talked about Hamas and the religion behind that as well. So, as a Christian, how should we view the war that's going on right now? Should we pick a side? Is there a side to pick? We're going to talk about this in good detail next week. So, I don't know where this whole conflict is going to escalate here. We can only assume that it will get worse here in the course of the next few days, but we will talk about this next week on the show. This will be episode 15. How should Christians view the war between Hamas and Israel? That's our next topic. So till then, we're going to go ahead and shoot it off to you guys. I'm going to give you guys a chance to promote what you guys have coming up. Then I'm going to let you know what we have coming up on this channel, because this week we got a lot of things coming up on the Society Reviews channel that you don't want to miss. But I'll give the floor starting off with Johnny here. What do you got coming up this week?
Coming up, I'm doing some writing on the unfulfilled prophetic wars in the Bible. So I'm working on the Ezekiel 38 and 39 Gog and Magog battle. There's a lot of questions about whether we're maybe looking at that right now in Israel today. Personally, I don't think we are, but I'm hoping to explain why this week.
All right, jumping over to our good buddy Samantha. What you got coming up then?
Nothing coming up. I'm gonna start trying to post more regularly on TikTok, so you can follow me on there. Sam got a TikTok. Yes, pray and read your Bibles.
Yeah, everyone should be doing that. And then finally, Connor, do you have anything that you got coming up that you want the people to know about?
Yeah, actually. So I only have one social media account, and that is Instagram, Connor_Dozier, Dozier. And I'm an ER Connor, by the way, so not a no R, just so you know. But actually, I'm wanting to do just something that I haven't done before, and that is launch a video called Faith and Reason on how they actually coexist, because that is a common argument that I hear from a lot of non-believers in the world. They're saying, "Oh, faith and reason, they're separate from each other," where the fact of the matter is, actually, no, that's not true. And so I'll be tackling a lot of theology, philosophy, science, history, so all that kind of good stuff. I've started on the notes. It's going to take me, I've just been doing a lot of reading on it lately. And so hopefully by sometime the end of this week, I'll have all the notes ready for, and I will soon pretty much start launching the video at some point next week. So keep that on your calendar, and read your Bible, stay faithful to the word of God, for in the end, it is God who is faithful overall.
All right, and then going back over here, let you guys know. Like I said, there's a lot of shows we got coming up this week, so I'm going to promote all of them. Tomorrow night on the Barroom Podcast, it's episode 70 of the Barroom Podcast. We've been doing this for 70 weeks now. Tomorrow night, we're going to talk about the whole conflict with Jada Pinkett Smith and Will Smith in detail, and there's a lot of things that go on there. None of them are good. We'll talk about that tomorrow night. We'll talk about the absolute meltdown from Tony Khan over the course of the last week. And are we in the last days of AEW? We'll talk about that tomorrow night. Disney's Daredevil is absolutely a disaster. They're going to rewrite the entire show. I don't know why they just won't refuse to let it go. We'll talk about that tomorrow. AMC refuses to let go of The Walking Dead. They're doing 3 new Walking Dead series. This is years after they lost 16 million viewers. They're still going on with this. And then we'll talk about Hollywood. Is there a realistic possibility here that Warner Brothers is going to get sold to NBC here in a couple of years, meaning that everything that you watch in Hollywood is dangerously close to being controlled by essentially 2 companies? And that is not a good thing, especially when we talk about control and what is being shown to the masses. So that's going to be talked about tomorrow, episode 70 of the Barroom Podcast. This Friday night, we're going to be doing another movie night. Last Friday night we did Bring It On. That whole full show is on Rumble right now, so if you guys want to go back and watch that show, that was a very, very fun show we did on Friday night, so go check that out. This Friday night we're watching the 1980s cult classic film Savage Streets with Linda Blair. We'll talk about that film on Friday night, and then we're actually going to be doing a show on Saturday night as well, because this Saturday night we're going to be doing a Saturday night movie club, and we're talking about the new Martin Scorsese film Killers of the Flower Moon. And we're bringing our good buddy Christian Toto, who's going to be joining us on Saturday night to talk about that show. That's a 7 p.m. Show. I think I have it at 8 right now, but we'll move that down to 7 p.m. We're going to talk about that movie, me, Rob, Rick, Christian, and maybe a few other people as well. So that should be a good one on Saturday night. And then next Monday night, we're back here again. We're going to talk about the whole Israel-Hamas war and the conflict and everything about from the Christian perspective. Who's the enemy? Who's the good guy? Is everyone the bad guy in this scenario? We'll talk about that next week on the show. This should be a very good, interesting topic of the current event. So till then, to all my guys who are joining me here on the show, Johnny, Connor, and Sam joining us here on the show. To everyone who joined us on our show tonight, I'll give you guys a quick little shout out here. Duke Nukem, Cassie, Kate, Awesome One, Henry Thrawn, who is here with us tonight, True Vanya, who's joining us, Don't Let Them Burn, Top Dog, who joined us for a little bit here tonight. I want to make sure I get everyone out here before I sign off here. Banyana Rad, I'll just want to give you a shout out as well. Justin, who is joining us on our show tonight, and I think that's about it. Oh, Excalibur, don't want to forget about Excalibur as well. So everyone who joined us in tonight's episode, thank you, and hopefully we'll see you guys, if not tomorrow night, hopefully Friday night, if not Friday night, Saturday night, if not Saturday night, next Monday night here on the Bible Lens podcast. So we're going to go ahead with signing off with the gospel of Jesus Christ. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Adios, people. Later on.
Later. When people say, no, our problem is this, our problem is that, we say, no. Our problem is that God created the world. And God created man, and he put man in the garden to keep the garden. And he gave the man a command. And he held that man to perfect, perpetual obedience to that command. And he promised him life if he kept it, and death if he didn't. And he didn't keep it. He ate. And because he ate, because of that one man, sin entered the world, and death through sin. And everyone born from that man through ordinary generation inherited that man's sin nature. And because of that sin nature, sins proceed from it. And our world is broken because of that sin. And we stand guilty before a holy and righteous God. And we know that he's holy, and we know that he's righteous, and we crave justice. But the problem is that if God gives us justice, we all die. And so that God, in his goodness and in his mercy, sent forth his son, who was not born of ordinary generation, but was born of a virgin. Yes, the virgin birth matters. Why? Because if he's born of ordinary generation, he's born in sin. But because he's not born of ordinary generation, he's not born in sin. He's clean of sin. His record is clean. And he keeps his record clean. And he obeys God's law. And because he's fully God and fully man, he obeys the law of God on our behalf in his active obedience. And then in his passive obedience, God made him who knew no sin to be sin for us. All we like sheep had gone astray. Each of us had turned to his own way, but God laid upon him the iniquity of us all. And Christ died for sin once for all, the just for the unjust. And God imputes our sinfulness to him. And he nails our sinfulness to the tree. And Christ dies and raises again on the third day for our justification. And there's another imputation. The righteousness of Christ is actually imputed to us so that God can be both just and the justifier of the one who places faith in Jesus Christ, so that all those who come to Christ may enter in, so that all those who place faith in Christ might be saved, but not only saved, but sanctified, because he's the firstborn of many brethren. We're justified and we're adopted into the family of God, and we're sanctified, and as his children we begin to bear the family resemblance, and we're further sanctified throughout this life by the very same gospel that saves us, until one day when it's all said and done, we're not just saved from the penalty of sin, we're not just saved from the power of sin, but one day we're glorified and saved from the very presence of sin. That's the gospel that we preach. That's the gospel that we need. And that's the gospel that's more than enough.